Zephaniah 3 itself begins with Jerusalem judged and ends with the daughter restored, not the city glorified as it was, but transformed. Beloved ones, before we go any further, we need to slow the pace, not to retreat, but to listen more carefully. Some revelations do not arrive as answers. They arrive as reorderings. They do not shout. They do not warn. They do not demand agreement. They simply rearrange how we see what has always been there. What we are entering now is not a new doctrine, not a prediction, not a declaration about modern events. It is a way of reading the prophets as they read themselves. In recent reflection, something subtle but important became clear. That Zephaniah chapter 3 does not move toward the glorification of a city, but toward the restoration of a bearer. This matters. When we read Scripture too quickly, we assume that restoration always means rebuilding what existed before. But the prophets often mean something else entirely. They mean transference. They mean purification. They mean continuity without repetition. And so, if at any point what we explore today feels unfamiliar, I want to reassure you. This is not because Scripture is being stretched. It is because we are allowing it to speak in its own grammar. A grammar shared by the Torah, the prophets, the Peshitta, and preserved quietly in the Ethiopian tradition. A grammar where cities fall, but promises do not. Where structures pass, but presence remains. Where judgment clears space for indwelling. Where exile ends, not by escape, but by restoration of the relationship. This is the pattern we are going to trace, carefully, gently, not by isolating verses, but by listening to how the prophets move. And to do that, we need to let three voices speak together. Zephaniah, Isaiah, Zechariah, not as separate messages, but as a single prophetic language. When we place Book of Zephaniah, Book of Isaiah, and Book of Zechariah side by side, something remarkable emerges. They do not disagree, they layer. Each prophet speaks into a different moment of crisis, yet they use the same internal architecture. First, the city is weighed. All three prophets begin in the same place. Jerusalem is exposed, not as an idea, but as a functioning system. Leadership has failed. Justice is distorted. Religion has become performative. Trust has shifted from presence to structure. In prophetic language, this is the moment when a city becomes a liability. The Torah already established this principle long before monarchy existed. When a dwelling no longer carries presence, it cannot be preserved for sentiment's sake. So the prophets do not rescue the city. They remove its false covering. This is where many readers stop and miss the point, because the prophets are not anti-Jerusalem. They are anti-substitution. They refuse to let a structure replace a relationship. Second, judgment creates space, not finality. In all three books, judgment is never the last word, but it is always necessary. Judgment dismantles what has claimed permanence without fidelity. In Isaiah, this looks like stripping and humbling. In Zephaniah, it looks like exposure and silence. In Zechariah, it looks like measuring and limitation. Different imagery, same function. Judgment clears the ground so something else can stand. Third, the focus shifts from city to daughter. Here's the hidden hinge. At a certain point, all three prophets stop addressing Jerusalem as a system and begin addressing Zion as a feminine bearer. This is not poetry. It is covenant logic. The promise was never finally entrusted to walls. It was entrusted to a carrier. The Torah already taught this through matriarchs. Isaiah deepens it through daughter Zion imagery. Zephaniah makes it explicit by letting the city fade entirely from view. Zechariah completes it by describing divine dwelling without reliance on walls. This is the moment when exile can end, because exile is not merely displacement from land. It is displacement of presence. When presence returns to its bearer, exile is already over, even if geography has not yet caught up. Fourth, restoration is indwelling, not reconstruction. None of these prophets promise a return to the old form. They promise something far more radical. Presence within, fear removed, shame reversed, honor restored publicly. In Zephaniah, the presence is described as dwelling in her midst. In Isaiah, light radiates from her outward. In Zechariah, divine presence replaces the need for enclosure. The logic is consistent. God does not come back to maintain what failed. God comes back to dwell with what endured. This is not abandonment of Jerusalem. It is fulfillment of what Jerusalem was meant to serve. Fifth, the nations respond, not by replacement, but by recognition. A crucial point, and one often misunderstood. In all three prophets, the nations respond after the restoration of the bearer. They are not the cause of restoration. They are the witnesses of it. The daughter becomes visible. The presence becomes undeniable. The exile ends publicly. This is why honor replaces shame. This is why praise replaces reproach. Not because the bearer demands attention, but because restoration is evident. Sixth, exile ends without evacuation. This is perhaps the most important shared feature. None of these prophets describe the people being removed from the earth as the solution to exile. They describe the presence returning to the earth. Dwelling, indwelling, nearness. The grammar is always the same. The city falls, the daughter stands, presence dwells, exile ends. This is not destruction for its own sake. It is a transformation through transfer. Beloved ones, before we go any further, we need to slow the pace, not to retreat, but to listen more carefully. Some revelations do not arrive as answers. They arrive as reorderings. They do not shout. They do not warn. They do not demand agreement. They simply rearrange how we see what has always been there. What we are entering now is not a new doctrine. It is not a prediction. It is not a declaration about modern events. It is a way of reading the prophets as they read themselves. In recent reflection, something subtle but important became clear. That Zephaniah chapter 3 does not move toward the glorification of a city, but toward the restoration of a bearer. And this matters, because when we read Scripture too quickly, we assume restoration always means rebuilding what existed before. But the prophets often mean something else entirely. They mean transference. They mean purification. They mean continuity without repetition. And so, if at any point what we explore today feels unfamiliar, I want to reassure you, this is not because Scripture is being stretched. It is because we are allowing it to speak in its own grammar, a grammar shared by the Torah, the prophets, the Peshitta, and preserved quietly in the Ethiopian tradition, a grammar where cities fall, but promises do not, where structures pass, but presence remains, where judgment clears space, for indwelling, where exile ends, not by escape, but by the restoration of relationship. This is the pattern we are going to trace, carefully, gently, not by isolating verses, but by listening to how the prophets move. And to do that, we need to let three voices speak together: Zephaniah, Isaiah, Zechariah, not as separate messages, but as a single, shared, prophetic language. First, the city is weighed. When the prophets begin, they do not start with hope. They start with honesty. They look at Jerusalem, not as an idea, not as a promise, but as a functioning system. Leadership is fractured. Justice is distorted. Religion has become hollow. In prophetic language, this means the city can no longer carry what it claims to represent, and so the prophets do not rescue it. They let it be weighed. This is not hatred. This is discernment, because a structure that replaces relationship cannot be preserved without doing harm. Second, judgment creates space. Judgment in the prophets is never the final word, but it is always necessary. It dismantles what is claimed permanence without fidelity. It removes covering that no longer protect. This is why judgment feels severe, not because God delights in collapse, but because collapse creates space. Space for truth, space for presence, space for something that can endure. Third, the shift from city to daughter. Then something subtle happens. The city fades from view, and a daughter appears. The language changes. The tone softens. The address becomes personal. This is not poetry. This is covenant logic. In Scripture, the promise is never finally entrusted to walls or systems. It is entrusted to a bearer. This is why the prophets speak in feminine terms here. They are not romanticizing. They are identifying where continuity truly lives. Fourth, restoration as indwelling. Restoration does not come as reconstruction. It comes as indwelling. Presence does not return to the old form. Presence returns to the one who endured. Fear is removed. Shame is lifted. Joy replaces vigilance, not because the world is suddenly safe, but because the presence is near again. Fifth, the nations respond. Only after this do the nations respond, not by replacing, not by conquering, by recognition. They see that something has been restored. Honor replaces reproach. Visibility replaces silence. This is not applause. It is witness. Sixth, exile ends without escape, and this is the final key. Exile does not end by leaving the earth. It ends when presence returns to it. Dwelling replaces distance. Nearness replaces fear. The city may pass, but the promise stands. The daughter stands, and the exile is already over. Now, this brings us to a threshold, because once we see how the prophets speak, we begin to see what they are moving toward. The restoration of the daughter is not an ending. It is a beginning. When presence returns, something else follows naturally. Order, alignment, rest. What Scripture later calls the age of peace does not begin with rule. It begins with dwelling. The millennium is not introduced as an era of control, but as an era where what was fractured is finally held together. This is where the children come into view. This is where inheritance replaces survival. This is where the government of heaven is no longer abstract, but relational, not imposed from above, but shared from within. The prophets prepared us for this without naming it. They taught us how to recognize it by watching what happens when the exile ends. And now that grammar carries us forward, not into speculation, not into urgency, but into expectation rooted in peace. And when the exile is ended, what follows is not chaos. It is order, not imposed, not enforced, but restored. The age we call the millennium does not begin with conquest. It begins with presence finally unhindered. What was fragmented is no longer pulled apart. What was scattered is no longer searching. What was displaced is finally at rest. The Son does not return alone. He does not rule in isolation. He does not reign from distance. He reigns with. The daughter stands beside him, not behind, not beneath, not hidden, beside. This is not symbolism. It is restored order. The throne is no longer solitary. It is shared. Authority and wisdom, strength and nurture, word and womb, together. This is why the prophets spoke of joy returning, of fear leaving, of singing beginning. Because when the queen is present, the land softens, and when the king and queen reign together, creation recognizes its balance. The government of heaven on earth. The government of heaven does not arrive as a system. It arrives as a household. Rule flows through relationship, justice through wisdom, order through love. The Father remains the source. The Mother restores glory. The Son governs as king. The daughter governs as queen. And the children take their place, not as subjects, but as heirs. This government does not dominate the earth. It heals it. It does not suppress difference. It aligns it. It does not erase humanity. It restores it. The role of the children of the exile, are no longer scattered. They are gathered, not all in one place, but in one order. Some serve as teachers, some as stewards, some as keepers of peace, some as bridges between realms, each according to calling, not rank. Inheritance replaces survival. Belonging replaces striving. They do not compete. They cooperate, because the wound of exile has been healed. The healing of creation, the land responds. The earth no longer groans. The waters settle. The air clears. Violence loses its grip, because fear has lost its throne. This is not magic. It is alignment. Creation always knew what it was meant to be. It was waiting for the mother to return and the daughter to reign. The mother's return. The mother does not return loudly. She returns as covering, as warmth, as life returning to barren places. The womb of creation opens again. What was frozen begins to grow. What was hardened begins to soften. This is why the prophet spoke of comfort, of nursing, of being gathered. Because when the mother is present, creation feels safe enough to live again. The final sealing. And then the family is whole, not announced, not proclaimed, recognized. The Father rests. The Mother dwells. The Son reigns. The daughter shines. The children rejoice. And God is no longer distant. God is at home. He dwells, not above creation, but with it. And when the exile is ended, nothing rushes in. Nothing breaks the quiet. There is no noise, no spectacle, only rest. The age that follows does not announce itself. It simply arrives. What was scattered no longer searches. What was wounded no longer braces. What was displaced no longer wonders where it belongs. The Son does not stand alone. He is not distant. He is not elevated beyond reach. He stands with her. The daughter is beside him, not behind, not beneath, not hidden, beside. And everything softens, because when she is present, the world remembers how it was meant to feel. And when they reign together, nothing strains, nothing resists. Creation exhales. The government of heaven does not arrive as rule. It arrives as order without pressure. Nothing is forced. Nothing is controlled. Everything is held. The Father remains the source. The Mother restores the warmth. The Son gives direction. The Daughter gives nurture. And the children, they are simply home. The children are no longer scattered. They are no longer hidden. They are no longer unsure. They do not compete. They do not strive. They belong. Some tend. Some teach. Some keep watch. Some bring peace. Each in their place. Each at rest. Inheritance has replaced survival. The land responds. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Naturally. The earth softens. The waters quiet. The air becomes kind. Violence loses its grip, because fear is no longer needed. The world does not struggle to be healed. It simply is. And then, the Mother, she does not arrive with sound. She arrives with covering, with nearness, with safety. The womb of creation opens again, not to effort, to life. What was closed begins to breathe. What was hardened begins to feel. This is why comfort returns. This is why the children settle. Because the Mother is here. And now, the family is whole, not declared, not announced, recognized. The Father rests. The Mother dwells. The Son reigns. The Daughter shines. The children rejoice. And God is not far. God is here, at home, with his household. Beloved ones, may you be held. May you be held in the quiet places. May you be held in the questions. May you be held in the places you do not yet understand. May you know that you are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not misplaced. You are exactly where you are meant to be. May the Father give you rest, not striving, not pressure. Rest. May the Mother cover you, not with noise, not with demand, with warmth, with safety, with nearness. May the Son walk with you, not ahead of you in distance, not behind you in absence, but beside you, steady, faithful, present. May the Daughter stand with you, not above you, not beyond you, but near, gentle, strong, alive. May every place in you that has felt exiled remember home. May every place in you that has felt hidden feel seen. May every place in you that has felt scattered feel gathered. May every place in you that has felt unsafe feel covered. May you be freed from striving, freed from comparison, freed from needing to be understood. May you be allowed to be exactly who you are, nothing more, nothing less. May your spirit rest, may your mind quiet, may your body soften, may you feel the nearness of God, not as power, but as presence, not as distance, but as dwelling.
And may the household of heaven watch over you. May the angels guard you. May the watchers stand at peace. May the children of light walk with you. May the family of God surround you, not in fear, but in belonging.
May you sleep without worry. May you wake without heaviness. May you move without pressure. And may you always know, even when you cannot explain it, that you are loved, that you are safe, and that you are not alone. Go in peace, beloved ones, and rest in the nearness of God. If this teaching was helpful, please like, comment, and share to help these insights reach those who are seeking truth. To our new subscribers, welcome. And if you haven't yet, we invite you to join us as a member and become part of our growing family. You will find the link in the description box on our homepage. We are praying for you and standing with you in the light of the two Messiahs. If you'd like to support the ministry, you can visit our store or bless our dear brother Michael through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Thank you for your love and encouragement, and stay tuned for our next video. May the spirit of wisdom and peace rest upon you always.